All right, well, we're continuing with our interview with Dr. Lydia McGrew here on the Best Facts Apologetics Answers show. We've talked about some unique evidences. That's one thing that I love about Dr. McGrew's work is she's kind of bringing us into some areas that not many apologists in our time have brought us. We've talked about undesigned coincidences. That's a prime example. Something that was studied in the past. It's absolutely riveting today, and I'm thankful that she has brought us back to that important area. So the question that I have, Dr. McGrew, is just what other types of evidence are you working on right now that maybe aren't in the limelight? Different types of evidences for the reliability of the Gospels that aren't as popular, so to say, in some of the apologetical literature that's out there right now.
Well, I do these in both the mirror of the mask and the eye of the beholder. And one of the things I also want to mention is if you get a hold of those, you'll see that each chapter has like a gray box at the end with summaries of what's in the chapter. And that can kind of help you look through and find parts that you want to read in detail, kind of big books. So let me just mention a couple of these categories. One of them is what I call unexplained illusions. So let me give an example of what I mean by an unexplained illusion. There's a lot of them in the Gospel of John. The disciples of John the Baptist, it says they were having a dispute with a Jew about purification. This is in John 3. And they come to John the Baptist and they say, Master, because he's their rabbi, the person that you attested to, that you baptized, that he's baptizing and all men are coming to him. So they're kind of complaining, and it wasn't really Jesus personally who baptized people, it was his disciples. But anyway, they're complaining that Jesus is more popular, and they're kind of like, aren't you worried about that? John the Baptist then gives a very famous answer that includes the sentence, he must increase, but I must decrease. What gets dropped in this, just kind of interesting, is the dispute about purification. The author, John the Evangelist, never explains what was the dispute about, how did it relate to Jesus baptizing and their complaint about Jesus' popularity. Was the other person they were arguing with one of Jesus' disciples? He does not explain. He drops it. And that's really interesting because if you listen to people talk and tell their memories, they'll do that. They'll start something and they'll mention something in passing. Like I might say, that was the day I had to take Joey to the vet, and you don't know if Joey is my cat or my dog or my rabbit. So, maybe you could stop me and say, who's Joey? And I'll say, well, it's my rabbit, but it's just the way that we remember things. And then we don't explain them always. Maybe our audience, even our first audience, doesn't know what we're talking about. So these unexplained illusions are really interesting. Another one from John is where it's talking about, it says in John 2, Jesus and his mother and his disciples and brothers went down to Capernaum and they stayed for a few days. Now it's a kind of a twofer because there's a outside confirmation there. You actually do go down to Capernaum because they've been in Cana, and Cana's in the hills, Capernaum's on the sea. So he's just speaking in this very natural geographical way because he probably walked it himself. His audience in Asia Minor, where the Gospel of John was first published, they probably wouldn't have even heard of Cana. So it's not like they would say, oh, cool, look what he's putting in there, He's just remembering it. But then the other thing is, what is this about their going to Capernaum and staying for a few days? He doesn't explain, like why or what. That's just this random piece of information that he's thrown in there. So that's another undesigned or unexplained illusion. And then another example would be unnecessary details. So you go to the Gospel of Mark, one of the stories about the storm in the boat, and it says Jesus was sleeping, and it says on a pillow. Okay, he was sleeping on a pillow. Only Mark mentions the pillow, so it's just like thrown in there. Earlier, in an earlier segment that we did, I talked about a undesigned coincidence in the feeding of the 5,000. And another one concerns the fact that Mark mentions the grass was green at the feeding of the 5,000. And then John mentions that it was Passover time, so the grass, in fact, would have been green. But in Mark, it's just another of these unnecessary details. Or a minute ago, I mentioned that Jesus is on the shore in John 21, and Peter puts on his coat before he jumps in. There's a lot of these. When John describes the foot washing, he gives how he set aside his garment, he girded himself with a towel and so forth, and he's got that, as I call it, eye of the beholder. So these argue for truth likeness, which is sometimes called verisimilitude, and that the author is writing something that really looks like what you would get if someone was really there. So these are some additional kinds of evidence for the eyewitness nature of the Gospels.
You mentioned name distributions in the past. Those are exciting. John's use of or description of pericardial effusion at the scene of the cross. There are so many of these there, and I'm thankful again for you bringing this type of stuff back into the conversation because it's important. Hey, we're not done with our interview. Dr. McGrew will be back to answer a couple last questions, so definitely don't miss those.